Dove chocolate tastes way better than their soap. Today, I'm going to recap a 2021 action thriller film called Castle Falls. The film opens with MMA fighter Mike stepping back from competitive fighting due to getting older and a severe shoulder injury. Facing financial troubles, he pleads with his old manager for one more chance. However, his manager points out Mike's age and recent series of defeats. Mike, driven by a need for money, insists and decides to challenge another fighter. Initially, Mike leads in the fight, but soon gets tired, allowing his opponent to win, which crushes Mike's belief in his own greatness. Now broke and without a home, he quits fighting, marking the end of his career. In need of a job, he starts working on a construction site, part of the team evicting Castle High Hospital. Mike must now rebuild his life outside of fighting. Elsewhere in the city, Richard struggles financially while caring for his daughter Emily, who is fighting leukemia. The medical bills keep increasing and Richard can't afford to pay the home caregiver for Emily. The hospital then informs him that Emily needs more chemotherapy, costing an overwhelming $400,000, a sum Richard can't pay as his insurance is maxed out. Richard is left desperate, unsure how to gather the funds needed to save Emily's life. In a federal prison, the scene shifts to Lando, a black inmate who gets into a fierce argument with Damien, another prisoner questioning him about some hidden cash. The situation quickly turns violent, with the prison warden watching silently as Damien and his crew attack Lando. Returning to Mike, he's seen lost in thought, reflecting on his dramatic fall from a celebrated MMA fighter to a construction worker with a modest income. His boss, noticing Mike's lack of focus, sharply scolds him, stressing the urgency of completing their work before Castle High's demolition. At the same time, the city's mayor is making a public announcement to the media. He declares that Castle High Hospital will be emptied out forcefully in just 2 days to make way for a new sports complex, giving very little time for anyone to respond. In the jail, Lando is watching this news and is shocked to learn of the quick eviction of Castle High Hospital. He quickly asks to meet with the chief warden, who turns out to be Richard. Lando, without delay, puts forward a bold offer. He proposes to give Richard money in return for his transfer to a different prison block in the south. This money could be exactly what Richard needs to pay for Emily's urgent medical care. But when Lando brings up Emily's critical health condition, Richard gets incredibly angry and, in a moment of frustration, hits Lando. The next day, Richard secretly meets with Lando, urgently asking about the money he talked about. Lando reveals that he once stole $3 million from Damien, and this cash is hidden in Castle High Hospital, which is about to be torn down. Lando insists he doesn't want the money for himself. He wants to help Richard get the money for his daughter's treatment. He only asks for Richard's help in transferring him to the South Block to escape Damien and his gang's constant attacks. After thinking it over, Richard decides to go along with Lando's plan. Unknown to them, one of the prison wardens, secretly working with Damien, learns about Richard's plan to move Lando to the South Block. This information implies that Damien and his associates won't be able to bother Lando anymore. When Damien finds out, he immediately suspects that Lando has recruited Richard to get the hidden money, guessing that Richard desperately needs a large sum of cash. Damien quickly gets in touch with his brother, Deacon, who's currently running Damien's drug business while he's in prison. During a break at the construction site, Mike starts a friendly chat with another worker, George. George shares that he didn't really want to be a construction worker with low pay, but he had no choice as he has a wife and 2 kids to take care of. Mike then opens up about his previous life as an MMA fighter, but now he's broke and taking any job he can to make ends meet. George is surprised to hear that Mike was once a well-known fighter, especially since George's children are fans of Mike. With no place to live, Mike is forced to sleep in his car, parked near the Castle High Hospital. Elsewhere in the city, Deacon and his wife, Kat, are keeping a close eye on the hospital that's about to be demolished. They're planning to sneak in after the construction workers leave for the day. Back at the site, as they work, George tells Mike about his dream to move to Alaska with his family and even suggests Mike might think about going there too. While cleaning a room by himself, Mike finds a bag full of money. It turns out this is the cash Lando hid before going to prison. When their workday is ending, George tells Mike they should leave quickly. Mike keeps his discovery secret, takes $10 from the bag, and hides it, planning to come back for it after everyone else has left. At the same time, Deacon is getting his men ready to break into Castle High Hospital. They're waiting for Richard, as Lando had told him where the money is. Deacon and his team plan to disguise themselves as construction workers to avoid drawing attention. Meanwhile, Richard is preparing to go to Castle High, telling his daughter he has some urgent work to do. At the same time, Mike, standing with George in line for a beer, remembers he forgot his jacket back at the construction site and decides to return to get it. Using the $10 bill he had earlier taken, he hurries back to the site. Once inside Castle High, Mike finds the money he discovered earlier right where he left it. He pauses to count it, believing he's the only one aware of its existence. However, at the same moment, Richard enters Castle High, and one of Deacon's crew sees him and quickly informs Deacon. Deacon and his team make their way into the building from the left side. Unexpectedly, they find a construction worker who was assigned to watch over the site until it's time for eviction. Kat, without hesitation, eliminates the construction worker to avoid any problems. Meanwhile, Richard, following Lando's instructions, goes up to the 6th floor and discovers explosive set to bring the building down in 4 hours. Deacon and his crew are meanwhile spreading out to look for Richard. At the same time, Mike, in a nearby room, spots Richard. He quickly puts the money back into the bag and starts to leave. As he's going down the stairs, he sees Deacon's men heading upstairs, prompting him to turn back. Richard then finds a note on the floor, indicating someone has taken the money. At that moment, Mike accidentally kicks an iron bar, making a loud noise. Richard hears it, but he's not the only one. Deacon and his crew hear it too, and think it's Richard. Realizing others are also after the money, Mike hides, and he sees Richard doing the same to avoid Deacon and his gang. Then, Deacon and his men's attention is drawn to another intruder, who turns out to be George, looking for Mike since he didn't come back. When Kat finds a bag of money in George's pocket, she mistakenly thinks he's the thief. Deacon and his team start torturing George to get information, even though George is clueless about the money. From his hiding place, Mike watches this unfold, unable to help. Because George doesn't give up any information, Deacon orders his men to eliminate him. Mike, in a mix of desperation and anger over George's death, accidentally exposes himself, leading to Deacon's gang capturing him. Feeling guilty about George's fate, Mike decides to take revenge. After hiding the money, Mike manages to fight off several of Deacon's men. However, he soon finds himself cornered by Kat and her crew. In a daring move, Mike breaks free and escapes through a garbage chute, but Richard, who's nearby, quickly catches him. Richard, holding a knife, confronts Mike, demanding to know where the money is. Mike insists he's just a construction worker and knows nothing about any money. When Richard momentarily loses focus, Mike attacks him, triggering a fierce fight between them. Their brawl is interrupted when one of Deacon's men steps in, aiming a gun at them. Mike and Richard quickly cooperate to disarm the gunman during a short moment of distraction. With more of Deacon's men approaching, they're forced to flee rapidly. Deacon orders his men to block all exits from the building and tries to negotiate with Mike, offering to spare his life in return for the money. However, Mike rejects the offer and chooses to confront Deacon's men directly. Finding himself trapped, Mike makes a bold move by jumping out of a window, clinging to thick curtains. As Deacon's crew shoot at him from below, Mike struggles to get back inside the building. Once inside, he confronts Kat, who is aiming a gun at him. Just in time, Richard intervenes, hitting Kat and causing her to crash into the window. Thinking Mike is by the window, Deacon's men continue shooting, only to realize they've mistakenly hit Kat, who tragically dies from the fall. Overwhelmed by his wife's death, Deacon swears to make sure Mike and Richard don't leave the building unscathed. While they're hiding, Richard helps Mike with an injury on his arm and again questions him about the money. Mike sticks to his story, claiming he's just a construction worker and knows nothing about the money. As they face off against the rest of Deacon's crew, Mike and Richard successfully take out all the remaining threats. In a moment of high tension, Mike points a gun at Richard, suspecting he might be an undercover member of Deacon's gang. Richard strongly denies this, explaining that he's involved only because he can't afford his daughter's medical treatment anymore. Mike, understanding Richard's desperate situation, uses a walkie-talkie to tell Deacon to come upstairs to get the money. Then, Mike goes to get the hidden money and decides to split it with Richard. Richard tells Mike to leave the building quickly, but Mike is intent on avenging George's death by defeating Deacon and his crew. Richard warns him that Castle High is about to be blown up, which could take out Deacon and his gang. Mike thinks it over and chooses to drop his plan for revenge, opting to escape with Richard instead. At the same time, the mayor and other construction workers are getting ready to demolish Castle High in just 15 minutes. Deacon and one of his last men chase after Mike and Richard as they try to escape through the building's roof. This leads to a shootout, with Mike having to dodge Deacon's attacks. Mike tells Richard to go ahead while he faces Deacon by himself. Deacon orders his men to block the exit, trapping Richard with the money. When Mike runs out of bullets, he challenges Deacon to fight hand-to-hand. Meanwhile, Richard takes out Deacon's last henchman and makes his escape in their truck. Ultimately, Mike emerges victorious over Deacon and takes the money. With the demolition of Castle High imminent, Mike has no other option but to jump into Richard's truck. Meanwhile, Deacon, who is still alive, tries to gather the money scattered across the roof. As they drive off, the building collapses behind them, leaving Deacon's fate unknown. A few days after this, Mike decides to use some of the money to support George's family, helping them deal with their loss. Remembering George's suggestion, he sets out on a new path to Alaska. In the meantime, Richard honors Lando's request and moves Damien to the south block of the prison. This shift is precisely what Lando wanted, as he plans to seek his own retribution against Damien. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.